I've never seen any, it looks like a movie. I saw a large plane, like a jet.
There is more and more fire and smoke.
Right, oh my God, another plane has just hit.
Exploded.
We just saw another plane.
As fire crews are descending on this area.
Something deliberate that has happened here. We're going to immediately...
We were sitting there watching this thing in New York, and I said, you know, the next best target would be us.
Oh my goodness, an explosion of some kind. There is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon.
At 9:42, a hijacked Boeing 757 carrying over 9,000 gallons of jet fuel rammed headlong into the largest office building in the world. The Pentagon contains 6 million square feet of space and over 17 miles of corridors, where a small city of military staff and civilians serve their country and much of the world as defenders of freedom. Flying 345 miles per hour, the plane plunged deep into the ring structure of Wedge 1. The crash killed 189 people and injured many more. Intense fires spread throughout the wedge. Millions of gallons of water from sprinklers and fire hoses filled all 5 floors. Smoke and soot poured across ceilings and through heating and air ducts into the rest of the Pentagon. Over 6 million square feet of the nerve center of our nation's defense was damaged, but not defeated.
A thousand things run through your mind, you know. Do I go volunteer at Red Cross? Do I go give blood? Do I, you know, what do I do? You feel this urgency to do something. And then the phone rang.
All of a sudden you had the ability to do something. I mean, I think that's what all Americans, how can I be of help? How can I be involved? Instead of just sitting there letting things happen. I think that was the exciting part. And I think the fact that ServiceMaster was uniquely qualified in this particular case.
When the call came from Nancy Judd, Director of Facilities Contracting at the Pentagon, ServiceMaster Clean Disaster Restoration knew how to respond.
Certainly, the call was not different from many other calls that we receive. We get calls frequently about these kinds of disasters, not the magnitude and not the cause of disasters, but we get calls from people that have flooded basements and burned homes and office buildings and large buildings that we take care of. So the actual event of what we were doing and what we had to do, that was normal.
I believe, based upon the questions I was asking her, based upon the experiences I'd had at the World Trade Center in 1993, that you could tell that we were asking the right questions, and I think it provided them a sense of comfort to know that they had reached the right organization who did have the answers for them.
Due to the serious nature and special requirements of this catastrophe, ServiceMaster Recovery Management was brought in.
The early expectations were that we were going to be dealing with somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 to 400,000 square feet of recovery space. As it turned out, there was much more than that.
I mean, one of the major issues we had was how to handle security and how to get our people into the building and how to move them around. The Pentagon is tough enough the way it is.
As mobilization continues, a ServiceMaster Clean disaster restoration crew is placed on 2-hour standby.
They're still fighting a fire, they're still doing search and rescue, so no one's allowed in the building. But at that moment, we put a 50-person crew on 2-hour alert. And simply put, if they gave us the call and said, be here, within 2 hours, we would be there.
This particular job, we had to use only ServiceMaster personnel. We could not use any temporary labor. Everybody had to be American citizens, and it made the dynamics a bit different. Plus, nobody could fly in.
With all air travel grounded, supervisors, crew chiefs, crew, and supplies start driving to Washington from as far away as Detroit, Memphis, and Fort Lauderdale. A fully equipped crew of 50 ServiceMaster Clean professionals assembles at the Pentagon. A walkthrough is conducted to assess the damage.
since it was a fully occupied building, we did have to take into consideration the tenants and the fact that we also had to take into consideration many safety issues, not only for our own staff, but for the sake of the personnel who work in the building.
By midday, the first of 2 daily shifts, eventually numbering over 300 trained service technicians from 64 offices, begins working around the clock to mitigate damage and clean all surfaces under extraordinary circumstances.
Just getting into the building on a daily basis for civilians and the employees of the Pentagon was certainly a challenge. Getting 200 people through with their cleaning supplies and equipment was a bottleneck at best initially. A couple of days into the project, for every 3 staff members that ServiceMaster provided, we had to have an escort with credentials from the Pentagon, which was one of the issues that delayed the project, because the Pentagon could only supply so many escorts.
We were cleaning a museum. We were cleaning and restoring museum quality pieces throughout, $600,000 paintings, hallways that were dedicated to General MacArthur, hallways dedicated to all colonels and generals with pictures of them all through the history of our country.
But I think the Pentagon and the whole 9/11 event kind of charged our people in a special way.
In less than 10 weeks, the last day shift completes the cleanup and restoration of the Pentagon. ServiceMaster Clean's job is done and appreciated.
Some major decisions were being made in the building while we were there. A lot of time and effort had to go into planning for the area that we would go into next for that very reason, because many items, many documents had to be cleared before we arrived into a room for obvious reasons.
Pentagon Building Manager Darrell Diggs expressed his thanks to ServiceMaster Clean. Cleaning the Pentagon is an understatement. What you did was put life back into the building. You made the Pentagon glow.
We arrive on the scene and the customer thinks all is lost and it'll never be the same again. After you've worked on the project for a few days, they start to see dividends and understand that it's not quite as bad as it looked or smelled. And then when the project's over, they're glad they met you. They just never want to see you again under those circumstances. And that was pretty typical of this project, with the one exception that at the end of the project, they really didn't want to see us leave.
This wasn't just another job. The incredible part was the emotion that carried throughout the whole job. It wasn't just another project of restoration, but we were actually involved in helping restore our country.